Hi, I'm Marge Dodge. Before diving into my presentation, I do need to take just a minute to clarify my choice. I had originally intended to present Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Adventure of the Speckled Band and the 1931 film adaptation titled Speckled Band, starring Raymond Massey. Upon viewing the film, however, I was so disappointed by its poor visual and audio quality, as well as by the gross liberties taken by its screenwriters as compared to the original story, that I decided instead to present Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray and the 1976 film adaptation by the same name. For those of you who may not be familiar with the work, Picture of Dorian Gray is an eerie, haunting tale of a handsome young man, Dorian, whose portrait somehow reveals all the effects of his degenerating character, while Dorian's own appearance remains completely unaffected and ever youthful. Dorian's descent begins when, with a selfishness fostered and encouraged by his cynical mentor, Lord Henry, he callously mocks and abandons a young actress named Sybil Vane. This leads directly to Sybil's suicide. Dorian's path is downhill from there. First, I'll present the positives. The casting of characters for the movie version was superb. Dorian looked exactly as I'd pictured him in my mind when reading the novel. John Gielgud delivered an absolutely magnificent portrayal of Lord Henry, Dorian's chief corrupter. The script itself was amazingly faithful to the original, importing Wilde's trademark rapid-fire wit and dialogue onto the screen, often word for word. And I was also impressed by the way the writers somehow managed to convincingly communicate Lord Henry's extremely cynical worldview. With just a few, mostly minor, exceptions, the film's overall plot does faithfully follow the storyline of the novel, including Dorian's two short-lived and ineffectual spells of remorse. The screenwriters do add a few extraneous details, however, like Dorian writing a letter to Sybil right before he learns of her death. Inventions like this one do not appear in the original, and I saw no reason for them, but since they don't detract from the story in any way at all, my feelings about them are neutral. There are, however, some areas in which I feel the adaptation does fall short. I'm sure, due to the constraints of movie making, time is often telescoped. The movie cannot, therefore, and does not show the gradual growth of Lord Henry's influence over Dorian, leading to the eventual complete corruption of the younger man's character. This telescoping of time also leads to the inefficient development of motive for some of Dorian's actions. An example of this is Dorian's sudden decision to allow, or actually to force, painter Basil to view his own creation, the portrait which had been until then hidden by Dorian at any cost. And then he murdered Basil. This scene is a very dramatic one in the novel, but without the gradual build-up presented by the novel, the film's version seemed to me to be less dramatic than inexplicably rash. Several plot elements were also completely omitted from the adaptation for no reason I could discern. Dorian's secretive visit to an opium den to find and secure the assistance of a young doctor whose life and reputation he had ruined was left out altogether. Dorian still blackmails the young man into helping him dispose of Basil's body, but the omission of those atmospheric scenes was a shame. That same alteration in plot also removed an extremely credible explanation of how Sybil's brother James was able to identify and try to kill Dorian as the man responsible for his sister's suicide 18 years after the fact. But perhaps the film's most glaring and disappointing aspect was its failure to include more visual images of Dorian's gradually degenerating appearance in the portrait. This slow deterioration of the painted Dorian, reflecting the correspondingly slow debasement of his character, is the very essence of the novel itself, and is described by Wilde in subtle yet graphic detail. Incremental changes in Dorian's image of the portrait could have been easily and very effectively depicted on film. Yet the movie showed only 3 images of the portrait: its original appearance as painted, its change following Dorian's first act of cruelty and betrayal of Sybil, and then one final shocking portrait view with its image portraying Dorian as a ruin of a man. This was a great opportunity the screenwriters missed. In conclusion, I think this film adaptation was in general very well done. It has its drawbacks, most of them probably necessary to compress an entire novel into a movie, but the casting is excellent, the acting is superb, and the script, as I said, is amazingly faithful to Wilde's own. So if you have the chance, I highly recommend this movie as well worth seeing. But speaking just for myself, I still believe nothing surpasses Wilde's original.